find a bathroom. I don't know, I thought it was cold in that other room. Yeah, as soon as he's gone home. Yeah, well, I don't even know why I bought this. Don't have enough time I'm as soon as he You ready to go? You ready to go? Call this meeting to order. Please stand, take off your hats, salute our flag, repeat after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I now turn this meeting over to Michelle Richardson for administration of the oath of office to Dr. Osmond.
I, Erica Osmond,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same and to the governments established
to the same and to governments established
in the United States and this state,
in the United States and this state,
under the authority of the people, so help me God.
under the authority of the people, so help me God.
I
I, Erica Osmond,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law
for the office of member of the Board of Education.
for the office of member of the Board of Education,
Am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 1941,
am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 1941,
am not disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense,
and not disqualified due to conviction of a crime or offense,
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform
and that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform
all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability, so help me God.
This meeting is in compliance with the Open Public Meeting Law and has been duly advertised in the newspaper as an official meeting. Roll call.
Mrs. Barakis,
Present.
Mrs. Cass,
Present.
Dr. Osmond,
Present.
Mr. Palmieri,
Present.
Mr. Sargent,
Present.
Mrs. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Walsh,
Present. Need a motion for approval of the agenda with addendums.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis,
Yes.
Mrs. Cass,
Yes.
Dr. Osmond,
Abstain.
Mr. Palmieri,
Yes.
Mr. Sargent,
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera,
Yes.
and Mr. Walsh.
Yes. I will turn this meeting over to Mrs. Palmieri for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, board. I do have a rather lengthy superintendent's report this month. We have a few presentations tonight, some important information to share, but most importantly, the way we love to begin our superintendent's report at the board meetings to hear from our high school student board representatives, and we'll begin this evening from hearing from Brooklyn, from Liberty.
Thank you, Superintendent Permilli, Board of Ed members, and guests. Happy New Year to all. I hope you had a nice, safe holiday over the break. Although this month did not start off as planned, Liberty did a great job adapting back to the virtual world. Students were excited to be back in person, back to sports and activities, and ready to make 2022 the best year yet. Despite all of the changes to the schedule, the athletic teams are still doing well. The boys swim team has an amazing record of 3-1. A big congratulations to one of our very own swim boys, Justin Watts, who was listed as one of the standout athletes in the short conference last Sunday. The girls swim team is also having a good start to their season with a record of 2-2. The boys basketball team has been playing and practicing really well and holds a record of 5-2. The winter track teams are still getting attention as well, with several participants earning medals and PRs at this weekend's event. The wrestling team took third at the Buck Classic Wrestling Tournament, and Tony Urso and Peter Aveline both won gold at their respective weight classes. All of the sports teams are working very hard. We are excited for all teams to complete the rest of their seasons and finish strong. The teams have not been the only ones practicing. The AtLib players have been busy at rehearsal and are only a little over a month away until their opening night for The Little Mermaid. They can't wait to perform for everyone on February 24th, 25th, and 26th. Before we left from break, JTV had a successful, entertaining annual holiday spectacular throughout the school day, which can be viewed on the Jackson Television YouTube channel. Even though the holiday season has come to an end, it includes lots of fun music videos, commercials, live events, and so much more, so be sure to check that out. Even though the start of this year didn't start off exactly as we wanted it to, we have a lot planned for the rest of the month and for the rest of the first semester, which will be ending on the 28th of this month. Thank you for your support of all that is going on at Liberty. I look forward to updating you next month with even more highlights because I know that this year is only going to get better from here.
Thank you, Brooklyn. I appreciate that positive attitude, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing The Little Mermaid. Okay, so for Memorial tonight, we have Dakota here to give us some updates.
Good evening, Mrs. Pormilli, members of the Central Administration staff, and board members.
First, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all our new board members and my sincerest thanks to those whose terms have just ended. The past month has been transitional, and we're thankful for the upcoming events that we hope will signal continued progress towards a more normal everyday experience. These include final exams on the 27th and 28th, which, well, to be honest, nobody is really looking forward to them, are necessary for our transition into a new semester. The class of 2023 has begun selling bids for junior formal, which is scheduled to take place on April 8th at Jumping Brook in Neptune, while the JROTC Ball is going to be held in March, also at Jumping Brook. The past month has also seen a great number of college acceptances for our seniors, including admissions to Pitt, UConn, Rowan, Fordham, William & Mary, Rutgers, Monmouth, Coastal Carolina, James Madison University, and Stockton University, among others. These achievements are not only a reflection of the great quality of education being provided, but also a testament to the efforts of our student body. We've managed a packed extracurricular schedule, including the Jackson Academy of Business's virtual field trip to Rutgers Business School to take part in their Ruby program. The Ruby program has been a great resource for business students as they learn and own skills crucial to their growth as future business people. Our DECA chapter has 18 members, myself included, of its 43 possible competitors qualified for state competition, with others also attending as a result of writing papers and presentations. That'll be starting next month in Atlantic City. The school's FBLA chapter is currently operating a vintage shop in McCullough, providing gently used clothing to underprivileged students, with each article costing only $1. The JROTC, meanwhile, has helped to raise money for the volunteer auxiliary at Pet Shelters Incorporated, aided in the Christmas event for Liberty Haven Farms, and consistently sent cadets to the food pantries to aid families and individuals in need. I'm especially happy to report a remarkably successful month for our sports teams, capped off by an absolutely brilliant string of performances from our girls' basketball team. Zoe Maffey, who I mentioned in the last update, put up a triple-double, our first in decades. Brooke McCown, the president of the senior class and all-around great player, broke the school record for three-pointers in a game. Finally, on that front, Amber Williams has been a brick wall on defense, putting up a double-double in her last game. We wish them luck in their future games. Another record-breaking performance has come from senior high jumper Adam O'Holy, who has broken the school indoor high jump record, jumping 6 feet 4 inches at the Ocean Breeze complex in Staten Island, a feat he hopes to match or better during his quest to make the national competition. The girls' wrestling team is ranked first in the state, winning their last meet against Kingsway, powered to victory by brilliant pins by Miranda Zona, Chloe Lawler, and Camilla Brevois. The boys' team is 10-4, ranked 7th in the Shore Conference, and Coach With Stanley wanted me to mention how engaged and involved the team has been. In particular, Luke Hammond, Jason Seda, Mike Rauch, Nick Afenador, and brothers Luis and John Espinoza, who had just moved to the district, are all having good years and prepared to defend the legacy of excellence that has been built on the JAG wrestling brand. The boys' swim team is 6-2 on the season, and the girls' team is working towards making the start competition. Our boys' distance team has placed third in the prelims for Ocean County Relays with multiple top 10 state relay times. And we're looking forward to attending the Ocean County Relay Finals on Thursday, where they hope again to place in the top 3. So again, a brilliant showing from our athletes this past month. We applaud them for their efforts and commitment to continued excellence, and we're thankful for this degree of normalcy for the winter season. We hope it will continue. So I'd like to finish off by again thanking members of the board and you, Ms. Superintendent, for allowing me the privilege of addressing this body. And I believe I'm speaking for everyone when I say I'm hoping for a safe, productive school year in 2022. I look forward to addressing you again next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota, for that informative report about the happenings at Memorial. So as I mentioned at the beginning of my superintendent's report, we do have a few presentations this evening. We'll begin this evening with a presentation to the board from our auditor, Mr. John Swisher from the Supplee, Clooney and Company, who will give us an update on our annual fiscal report.
I chose the wrong seat. Good evening, everybody. I come here once a year to talk to you about the results of your audit. The audit's required by the state of New Jersey. Every school district in the state has to have one. Tonight's a little bit different, though. You have in front of you a draft of the audit report. This is because the reports across the state, again, are delayed due to the fact that the state of New Jersey cannot provide certain information to us involving one of the accounting standards, GASB 75. Has to do with your post-retirement benefits. We're hopeful that this information is going to be issued within the next couple of weeks. Once that's done, we will amend the report that you have in front of you, and we'll be able to officially issue it. The changes are not really going to change. A lot of the numbers in your report is kind of a net deal, a zero-sum type of situation. So most of the numbers you have in the draft there are going to remain the same, which is good. But again, I'll just start at the beginning. I'm going to treat this as though this is the report, okay, although it is in draft right now. The reason that you hire our firm or any firm to come in and do an audit is to render an opinion on your financial statements and to say that they are free from material misstatement. So we come in every year and we check the records and we test the records to make sure that they're correct. And the best opinion that you can get is an unmodified opinion, which is what you've got this year. And that basically means that the finance department, the business administrator's office, can provide records that we can put into a format that complies with GAAP and that we can render an opinion that they are free from material misstatement. You can rely upon them, yourselves, the public, a lending institution, et cetera. So a clean opinion, that's great. Also, as a government unit, you have other opinions in the report that involve internal controls, which are the rules and regulations that you have internally to process orders, post receipts, et cetera, and compliance with the various rules and regulations of the state of New Jersey. So there's an opinion on that, and that is clean as well. Okay, if we had a lot of issues with our testing, you would see that there would be a modification of that opinion. But again, our testing did not reveal anything that required comment in that opinion, so 2 for 2. Thirdly, we're required to do a third opinion on federal and state programs. It's called a single audit, where we go in and we look at various programs. We rotate them each year, your Title I program, your IDEA, and very, very appropriate now, the CARES Act money that came out really was a game changer. But the district did a good job with that as well. We did a lot of testing on that and didn't find any material problems, so that opinion is clean too. So the report that I have in front of you is called was called the CAFR, C-A-F-R, has now been changed to ACFR, A-C-F-R. I'm still getting used to it myself. Is a change that it was going to be required for reports starting next year. We've early implemented it, and it turns out that the previous name was not a good word in another country, so they changed it. So you'll see throughout the report that might be a little confusing to some people, but they've changed it from the previous name to ACFR, and I'm still working on pronouncing that, but we'll get there eventually. Secondly, you're going to get a second report on top of the new ACFR, and it's called an Auditor's Management Report. That report is required by the State Department of Education, and they ask us to specifically report on various areas of compliance that they deem to be important, be it payroll, student activities, capital assets, et cetera, et cetera. It's this report where you would find comments and recommendations. Okay, as I kind of already gave away the end of the story, your opinions are clean, and that basically means that you don't have any comments in your management report, which is really good as well. So it's actually good news tonight. The opinions are clean, and the management report, when you do receive it, when we get all the final information, will be clean as well, because again, the information that we're waiting for from the state is not going to change anything that I'm speaking about here tonight. So that's the reporting element of it. Fiscally, you're still in good shape. I'll particularly take note to say that you were able to put $500,000 of your surplus into the capital reserve. Okay, for those of you that heard my speech before, you're allowed to keep certain money set aside for restricted capital projects contained within your long-range facility plan. And you use the money, but you have to reseed it from time to time. And it's hard to do. As things get tighter, okay, the budgets get tighter, it's hard to put money into that account, but you were able to put $500,000 into it, which is key. In a district the size of Jackson, with all the buildings that you have, you're constantly in the process of upgrading and doing things. So it's really important to get money into that account. So you were able to accomplish that year, which is very good. So I'll pause right now, and I'll take any questions from the board or from the public on the draft ACFR. There's a lot of information in the report, and so as you look through it and it gets finalized, if there's any questions that come up, I'd be more than happy to come back to a meeting and answer any questions that you have. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank the business office, particularly Sandy Patterson sitting over there. She takes most of the slings and arrows during our process, and it's not easy. You're trying to do your job day to day, and it's the death by 1,000 cuts, question after question after question. And we get answers quickly, and that's kind of important We ask for information, we get information. Any issues that we have are resolved. So it's a very good job. Michelle, of course, was used to sit in that seat a long time ago. Now she's moved up a little bit, but she knows what that's all about. And we got great support from your administration. They're doing a fine job. So if there's no other questions, I'll conclude. And again, if you need anything from us, you'll get the final report hopefully within the next few weeks. And if you have any other questions as you go through the report, I'd be happy to come back.
Thank you, Mr. Swisher. Much
Thank you.
appreciated.
No problem.
And thank you and congratulations to Ms. Richardson, Ms. Patterson, and the rest of the business department on a very clean audit. Nice work. Thank you. Also this evening, we have Mr. Rattante, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum Instruction, who will be presenting again on our Start Strong data. Mr. Rattante did already report publicly on this data that was available to us earlier on in the school year through the Pearson website. However, our disaggregated data, our subgroup data, was not available at that time, so he is going to present on our subgroup data this evening. Mr. Rattante?
Thanks, Mrs. Permilly. Yeah, I just want to take a few minutes to go over what our Start Strong data shows from our test that was administered back in October to all of our students that I'll explain who received them. So the rationale behind the Start Strong assessment, it was to provide all districts with a piece of data that would help support curriculum and help support instruction. Our districts, for as long as I can recall, we've always had several different data points, several different assessments that we've used to provide that information to us. So this was just one additional piece that was available to the district that we were able to use from our October assessments. You can see from this slide here that all of our students in grades 4 through 10 were assessed in the areas of English. All of our students in grades 4 through 8 were assessed in mathematics. Our high school students that were in geometry, algebra 1 or algebra 2, and as well as our science students in grades 6, grades 9, and grades 12. On the high school level, all of our students in those courses were assessed regardless of where they were in their block schedule. So a student that may not have geometry till the spring semester was still given this assessment in October to provide us information for each student. This is a district summary of our English assessment, and the way that Start Strong reported the data was basically 3 categories. It was either reported as for each individual student if strong support was needed, if some support was needed, or less support was needed. Each individual student also received their own breakdown of how they did with much more specific information as far as the amount of questions they got correct, what areas they got questions correct. All of those forms were sent home with all of our students the week before our winter break. If any parents did not receive that and your student is in one of those assessment grades, just reach out to your school or myself and we will get you a copy of that information if you did not receive it. Sorry, thanks, Nelson. In the area of literacy, where you can really see on this slide is, the majority of our students did show that less support was needed. This is really a tribute to really how hard our students have worked over the past year. Regardless of the changing learning environments we've had, our kids have done a nice job of reading, writing, and kind of staying on top of those skills. And this data really does show a trend that less support was needed in the areas of literacy based on this specific assessment. Math showed a slightly different picture. Math definitely showed there was definitely some more support needed in the areas of mathematics. You can see very specifically in the areas of grades 4 and 5, more support was needed in those areas. This assessment too is a different type of assessment, completely done on the computer. Typically when we have these type of assessments, we spend time working with our students to make sure that they're aware of the test format, they're aware of the ins and outs of completing answers online, there's drop-down menus, things like that. In light of this being a one-day snapshot, the literacy test was 10 questions, the math was about 20 questions. We really felt that the time was better spent leading up to this test and really making sure that we were continuing teaching and our students learning versus spending time on test prep and making sure they knew how to finagle a certain website. So that may have impacted some of our student scores, but either way, it did give us, we are provided with some good data that we can use moving forward. The area of science, you can see here, same thing, grades 6, grades 9, and grade 12. And on the high school level, many of our 12th graders have completed their science requirements. They are not even taking science courses this year. So what the test was assessing was really material that they're not going to be working on during the school year. but we did administer that test to all of our students in grades 6, 9, and 12. You can see here from our subgroup data, this first slide's in literacy. What it did show, and it's obviously something that we're well aware of, and I think all districts are well aware of. Students in the areas of special education and ELL are always going to need your strongest support. We have the most amount of programs available, the most amount of support for those students, and we'll work with them on the next couple slides. I'll mention some of the ways that we'll be working with all of our students, but specifically our special ed and our ELL students. And the math data with our subgroups also shows, the same results that, in the areas of special ed and ELL, that's the one area where our students, definitely do need our most support. This is just a listing of all of the district assessments that we do use on an everyday basis. These are terminologies and words and programs that are very familiar to your children, very familiar to our teachers. The way that this information is used in the classroom is very beneficial to the students. It's really proven data, whereas the Start Strong data is really unproven assessment. It's the first time it's ever been given. These are assessments that we've used for many, many years and are very tried and true, and we're able to get very valuable data from these assessments. This next slide is just an example of one of the assessments that we use. We use our math benchmark testing, and this slide shows how our students overall did by grade level this year. I went back 2 years to the year before the pandemic began, and then 2 years prior to that in the 17-18 school year. And what you can see from this chart is, our students have performed at a very comparable level after the first 4 topics of the math series. This test is given usually typically in December and January. It assesses how our students did during the first 4 units and what their content mastery is of that knowledge after the first 4 units. You can actually see that in some areas, our students in some grade levels outperformed how they did 2 years ago or even 4 years ago. This next slide shows our SMI assessments that we use, our mid-year Lincoln assessments that we use. Our goal throughout the year is always to see progress in our students. We always want to see our kids progressing. We want to make sure that they're learning. We want to reach each individual kid and move them along as they progress in their educational program. The slide on the left there, the picture on the left, that is a test that was given in the beginning of the year. That's Form A at the very beginning of the year. And what that shows our teachers and shows our staff is students that are not meeting grade level standards, students that are only partially meeting grade level standards. As the year progresses, we want to move those kids up that continuum. The slide on the right shows Form B, which was just given in the last few weeks, and from that slide you can see we've moved kids who were not meeting standards to partially meeting. We've moved students who are partially meeting to meeting standards. Students who are approaching standards to now meeting or exceeding standards. So our goal is to constantly move kids up on the continuum, and a lot of the data that we're using and really the hard work to our teachers of what they're doing with our students in the classroom and what our students are doing in the classroom is a tribute to why our students are, many of our students are moving up that continuum. Another program that we've really been using a lot this year is called IXL. IXL is an individualized program that addresses each student's needs. Questions are given to the students based on their level. As they get questions right, they get harder. As they get questions wrong, they get more remedial questions to reinforce things. These are done in the classroom, as well as kids have opportunities to do these independently at home. Typically, a student doing about 15 questions a day will outperform their peers, will move up the continuum, will show growth. So far through last week when we ran this report, our students in grades K through 8 are averaging 63 questions per week. So our students are really working very hard. We're very proud of what they're doing, and it's definitely showing in how they're doing in the classrooms. Based on that 63 questions number that was on the previous slide, you can see on this slide, this is the average monthly growth by grade level in math. You can see how the students are growing, especially in the upper elementary, middle school level where the skills are getting harder and more work is being put into that. So to address some of the needs that we've seen, not just in the Start Strong data, but also the data that we have and what we've seen with our own students, we have many programs that we've been running throughout the year, and others, there's some additional ones that you'll see on the agenda tonight, additional programs that you'll see moving forward in future board meetings. We can't run every program every day. We have staff members that have to do these programs. We only have so many availability with staff members and buses and transportation to make sure these programs work. So what you can see up here is after-school programs that are currently being run in the middle school and high school level. We have an elementary before-school program that's on the agenda this evening that will be starting up next week. That'll give our students that were identified as some of the students needing strong support with intense instruction in the areas of literacy and math to help them progress. We'll continue to do our summer school programs that we ran last summer as well as coming into this next summer. And in addition to that, too, there's ELL programs for our ELL students that we'll be running, and also other programs that happen outside of the school day, such as intramurals that will be, you'll see on the agenda. You'll also see programs like esports. These are programs that we want to enhance our school environment for our students and increase their appreciation of being in the school setting. Certain programs that are just math and literacy based don't always make kids excited to come to school. When you have some programs that really kids enjoy and they look forward to, it increases their desire to be in school, and also then academic success can follow from that. So here's just a general list of some of the programs that we've been providing so far, and we'll continue to be providing additional programs as the year progresses and even into obviously the next school year as well to address all of our student needs. Okay. At this point, I'll ask any questions from the board regarding any of the slides or information. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vitante. I know you, the directors, supervisors, building administrators, teachers, are all working hard to target the areas we know that we need to support our students in. Lots of interventions happening during the school day and beyond the school day. So a few updates before we move to our next presentation in regards to a December board meeting and the January reorganization meeting. At the December board meeting, during public comment, there was a reference made to a chair, or said to be, as said at that meeting, a breathing chair in a PE class in one of our schools. As described at that meeting, it was described as a place in which one student at a time was to sit and take a mask break. Obviously, we did an investigation the very next day and discovered that the chair that was used to define where the students could take a break safely, as they are using a half of the gym for lunch so that they can socially distance, while students on the other side are participating in PE. So it prevents us from pulling the bleachers out for a safe spot for students to take a rest. The chair defined the space on where it was safe to sit so that no one would get hurt during the PE period. The teacher encourages that students use that area to sit if they need a break for any reason in the class so that they are safe. The teacher also does not make students wear a mask during activity, nor was it called a breathing chair. Our PE teachers do remind our students that they do need to wear a mask. They do not need to wear a mask for any physical activity, but please know that some students do choose to still wear it even though we remind them that they do not need to. We allow for the choice. As always, I encourage parents to reach out to the teacher first with a concern, and then building administrator, and follow the chain of command if they have any other concerns. So I wanted to update the public on that information. Additionally, at the last board meeting, it was a reorg meeting, we had some questions in regards to timelines and process for the non-public transportation. I just wanted to update again the public and the board. As mentioned, the district is striving to make the process and communication clearer. And one step in that direction, there is now a non-public transportation page on the district website under departments, and go to transportation. This should assist our non-public families with information and forms, and any updates that we have, we will continue to post on that page. There is and has always been an email address that our non-public families can use to send questions to. I encourage our non-public families to use that web address. So those are just a couple updates. Continuing with our presentations tonight, I am going to ask Mr. Zittimer, our board attorney, to present to our board members an overview of the ethics now that we have a full board who has been sworn in. Mr. Zittimer?
Good evening, members of the board, members of the administration, members of the Jackson community. Thank you for inviting me here to speak on the New Jersey School Ethics Act. For those who are here at our organization meeting, I did an executive summary of the School Ethics Act, but as Ms. Pormilli points out, now that the full board is seated, we felt it was appropriate to get a little bit more into the weeds in terms of what the School Ethics Act requires of school officials. So in New Jersey, we have the School Ethics Act. Is there a remote that I can use or to advance the slides by any chance? Or? Okay. So I'll just tell you to advance for me, please. Thanks. Perfect. You can go to the next slide. So in New Jersey, we have the New Jersey School Ethics Act, and the School Ethics Act essentially prescribes the ethical do's and don'ts for Board of Education members and other school officials. And the preamble, the opening statement to the School Ethics Act, sums up very nicely why we have the Ethics Act in the state of New Jersey. And what it says is that in our representative form of government, it's essential that the conduct of members of local boards of education and local administrators hold the respect and the confidence of the people. The officials must avoid conduct which is in violation of the public trust or which creates a justifiable impression among the public that such trust is being violated. And I always advise board members that you not only have to avoid actual conflicts of interest, but you also have to avoid what's called the appearance of impropriety. If there's something that doesn't pass the smell test, if somebody's going to question whether you're acting for your own personal interests or for the interest of a family member or a business that you're affiliated with, you should always avoid that course of action. If it's a vote that's come before the Board of Education, you should abstain. If it's a closed session discussion, you should recuse yourself and so forth. I would always err on the side of caution when it comes to acts because you are a public official. Next slide, please. So who does the School Ethics Act apply to? The Act not only applies to Board of Education members, it also applies to employees and officers of the New Jersey School Boards Association, as well as school administrators. Now, within the School Ethics Act, we have the Code of Ethics, which I'm going to go over in a minute. The Code of Ethics only applies to the conduct of Board of Education members. Next. So other key terms that I wanted to highlight are a member of an immediate family. And the School Ethics Act really does draw a little bit of a distinction between members of immediate family who are your spouses of board members or school officials, dependent children who actually live in your household, and then you have relatives. Relatives would be a spouse. The picture kind of covered the slide there, siblings, as well as your children who are emancipated. And there's a greater conflict generally when it comes to members of your immediate family than it does to relatives. For instance, if you're a Board of Education member and you have a sister, for instance, that's in a neighboring union in another school district, generally, you're allowed as a Board of Education member to participate fully in the negotiations process if you have a relative who's in the same union. The same does not hold true if you have an immediate family member, say, who's in a union in a neighboring school district. So, for instance, if your spouse works in a neighboring town and they're a member of the NJA, for instance, if you're a board member, you have to fully recuse yourself from the negotiations process until there's a memorandum of agreement and salary guides, at which point then you can get involved. So again, there's a greater conflict when it comes to members of your immediate family. Next slide. So the School Ethics Act is essentially broken down into two parts, and I've handed out a copy of it to the members of the board here this evening. We have Section 1, which deals with conflicts of interest. Those are things where board members shouldn't act if they have a direct or indirect personal or financial involvement. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you also have the Code of Ethics for board members. This is all, by the way, codified in board policies available on your website as well. Next slide. So I want to go over some of the various Code of Ethics provisions, and I've, again, handed them out to everybody. So Section B of the Code of Ethics, and by the way, they're all pertinent. There's lots of them, so I did want to highlight some of the areas that I thought were more pertinent and perhaps areas where sometimes board members may get themselves into a little trouble. Section B says, I will make decisions in terms of the educational welfare of children and will seek to develop and maintain public schools that meet the individual needs of all children, regardless of their ability, race, creed, color, sex, or social standing. Next. We have Section C. Section C really defines what the role of a board member is, and I think a lot of members of the community sometimes think that board members have a lot greater authority, a lot greater involvement in the day-to-day operations of the school district, which is really not true. The role of a board member essentially is to set policy for the school district. So the Code of Ethics in Section C says the role of a board member is to set policy, plan for the future of the district, and appraise. At the end, take a step back and say, how are we doing? The code says you're supposed to frame those policies and plans only after the board has consulted those who are affected by them. We generally do this through our various work on our committees. Next. Section D, and this is an area where board members frequently get themselves into trouble. You will carry out your responsibility, and I want to highlight the word not there, not to administer the schools, but together with your fellow board members to see that they are well run. Not to run the schools, but to see they are well run. We have an excellent administrative team here in Jackson. They are the ones that are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school district, not the Board of Education. So the Code of Ethics and some of the other regulatory provisions set forth what somebody would have to show, for instance, to show that somebody violated all of the sections. But let's see what they said about that particular section. So to show that somebody, a board member, respondent, violated the administration provision, somebody would have to show that a board member gave a direct order to school personnel or became directly involved in activities or functions that are the responsibility of school personnel or the day-to-day administration of the school district. And so the SEC, which is the School Ethics Commission, in this particular case from 2005, found that a board member violated this section when the board member went into the office, demanded copies of SAT reports from the guidance secretary, did his own inspection of the school lockers in the boys' locker room, gave directions to the PE teachers about how they should better teach the classes that particular day, and talked generally to the staff about supervision. This board member went way off the rails here, should not have been getting involved in that at that level by having direct interactions with staff, giving orders to staff, and so on and so forth. So next, as a board member, you have to recognize that your authority rests with the Board of Education. You have authority to act when you're at a meeting like this with your fellow board members, and that you're not allowed to make personal promises or take private action that could compromise the Board of Education. It doesn't actually have to compromise the board. It's enough that it has the potential to compromise the Board of Education. So again, you should not be making promises outside this meeting to folks in the community about what you're going to do and so on and so forth, or do your own investigation or take otherwise what's called private action. That's a clear violation of Section E. Next. Section F. You are to refuse to surrender your independent judgment to special interest groups or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. Again, as I pointed out in one of the earlier slides, you're here for everybody. You're not supposed to be catering to a particular special interest group. Next. Confidentiality. So board members, as members of a Board of Education, come upon a lot of confidential information, and the law does allow us to go into executive or closed session to discuss confidential matters, confidential student matters, confidential personnel matters, matters of attorney-client privilege, and so forth. And what the Code of Ethics says is that board members will hold confidential all matters pertaining to the schools, which, if disclosed, would needlessly injure individuals or the schools, and in all other matters, you have to provide accurate information. So you're certainly allowed to express your opinions and so forth, but the point is you have to make sure that what you're saying as it pertains to the Jackson School District is accurate. Next, I will support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Does this mean we have to rubber stamp everything that comes our way from the administration? No, it does not. But it also allows, of course, board members to ask good questions. You're supposed to ask good questions. We're supposed to engage in dialogue. But the point is, we're not supposed to evaluate our administrators in a public setting. We're not supposed to publicly embarrass our administrators and other staff members in the Jackson School District. That is not supporting and protecting school personnel. And so if somebody were to try to prove there was a violation of this particular provision, they would have to show evidence that a board member took deliberate action which resulted in undermining, opposing, compromising, or harming school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. Next. So Section C says that you're going to refer all complaints to the administrative officer, in this case, Ms. Pormilli, and you're supposed to act on those complaints at a meeting only after the failure of an administrative solution. So if somebody comes up to you at the local supermarket with a complaint about the teacher giving too much homework or the principal not doing this or that, you're supposed to thank that community member, and you're supposed to in turn take their name and give it to Ms. Pormilli, because Ms. Pormilli, as the chief administrative officer, is the one who is responsible for handling all complaints in the district. It gives the board members, quite frankly, an opportunity to punt and to get the complaint in the right hands, which again is that of the administration. Next. So if somebody believes that a particular board member violated the School Ethics Act or a code provision, or administrator violated the Ethics Act, what is their recourse? Their recourse is to file a complaint with the New Jersey School Ethics Commission. The School Ethics Commission is part of the Department of Education. It's an agency in the state of New Jersey. It's comprised of 2 community members. It's comprised of superintendents from certain school districts who have been appointed by the governor. The Attorney General also sits and guides the School Ethics Commission. They have a director and so forth. It's comprised of about 11 members, and they are the ones responsible for deciding whether a particular Board of Education member has violated the School Ethics Act. So somebody can file a complaint, anybody can file a complaint with the School Ethics Commission. The only caveat is that there's a 6-month statute of limitations, so the complaint has to be filed within 6 months of the time that the alleged violation took place. The other thing I want to point out to board members is that New Jersey has an indemnification statute. And what that essentially means is that when a complaint is brought against a board member or other school official for something that arose out of them being on the Board of Education, the law does provide that board members are made whole for any out-of-pocket legal fees and expenses that they may incur in defending themselves. And you might say, well, that sounds crazy. An ethics complaint is filed and the board member gets an attorney basically at Board of Education expense. And the answer is yes. Our legislature figured that if they didn't have indemnification for volunteer board members, nobody would ever want to be on a Board of Education if they could be personally, financially out of pocket for cases. Some have merit, and I've seen many that don't. So that's important to mention, that we have this statute. So like I mentioned, the School Ethics Commission is really the only entity in the state of New Jersey that could determine whether somebody's course of conduct violated the School Ethics Act. If there's ever a question about whether a board member should engage in a particular course of action, you can actually write to the School Ethics Commission and they will issue what's called an advisory opinion. You set forth what the facts are and they will give you an opinion about whether you should or should not engage in that particular course of action. As board attorney, I'm also happy to provide my own opinion, although ultimately it's only the School Ethics Commission's opinion that matters on these things. So if somebody has violated the School Ethics Act, what are the penalties? So at the light end, you have a reprimand. That's essentially a letter from the School Ethics Commission slapping the board member or other school official on the wrist or on the hand for violating the School Ethics Act. You have a censure, which is the next step up. A censure is a resolution, a public resolution read at a board meeting admonishing the board member for violating the School Ethics Act. A board member could be suspended from the Board of Education. I've seen cases where board members are suspended anywhere at the low end from 30 days to up to a year. And then ultimately, the most severe sanction is removal from the Board of Education. So do you think a board member could be, that you can file an ethics case against a board member if they're no longer on the board? What do you think about that? Dr. Osmond is shaking your head yes, and you are correct. Of course, removal is not going to be an option in terms of penalty, but the censure could be, as long as it fits within that 6-month statute of limitations. So one of the questions I often get is, do board members lose their right to speak out on issues now that they're on the Board of Education? And the answer is no. Board members have First Amendment rights, just like everybody else does, to express their viewpoints on issues. The only caveat, as I mentioned before, is that you have to say things that are accurate about the school district. You can't say, I'm not voting for the school budget this year because we're adding 10 new administrators in Jackson, when in fact the reality may be, I'm just making this up as an example, we're only adding 2 administrators in Jackson. So if you're going to say something, the key is you have to make sure that what you're saying to the community is accurate. You also can't divulge confidential information, so that's a limitation, or you can't take action which has the ability to compromise the board or to undermine our administration. And that has to go with the last bullet point there about not publicly criticizing staff. Other than that, you have First Amendment rights. What's important to recognize, though, is that when you're outside of a Board of Education meeting and you're going to give a speech to the community, you're going to write a letter to the newspaper, which is your right, it's important that you have a disclaimer. And what our policy says is that you should not represent your personal opinion as the position of the Board of Education, and you have to include in all formal expressions, such as letters to government officials, newspapers, and so forth, a statement that you're speaking as a private citizen, you're speaking as an individual, you're not speaking on behalf of the board, and that your opinions don't necessarily represent that of the Board of Education. Just so there's no confusion in the community that is Mr. X board member speaking for the Board of Education, or is Mr. X board member or Miss X solely giving their own viewpoint and their own personal opinion. So it's important, if you're a board member, for instance, that likes to use social media a lot, make sure you have that disclaimer when you talk about issues pertaining to the Jackson School District to make it crystal clear that you are speaking in your individual capacity and not on behalf of the Board of Education. And I gave everybody a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Here's the sample language that the School Ethics Commission suggests that you utilize, which is that the following statements are made in my capacity as a private citizen and not in my capacity as a board member. These statements are also not representative of the board or its individual members and solely represent my own personal opinion. So that's like their model language. So I've done a little quiz here. Unfortunately, the slide is a PDF, so I can't really have the true and false, rise and fall, but I'll tell you what the answers are. And this is not to play gotcha with anybody, but these are actual real cases from the School Ethics Commission. So I'm gonna just go down the line here. Ms. Barakis, and I know you're new, so you kind of get a pass, but what do you think? This is a real case. These are cases that came out of the School Ethics Commission this past year. So tell me what you think of this case and whether this is a true or false. A Board of Education member who is a deacon, and by the way, if you go to the New Jersey School Ethics Commission website, part of the Department of Ed, just Google New Jersey School Ethics Commission. If you actually want to read these cases, some of them are 20 pages long. I've kind of distilled them down to like a small paragraph here. But if you want to read more about the facts of these cases, you can certainly do that on their website. But in this case, a board member who was a deacon with a local church and received an annual $2,000 honorarium for his services violated Section C of the Act, and Section C says no school official shall act in his official capacity in any manner where he, a member of his immediate family, or a business organization in which he has an interest has a direct or indirect financial involvement that might reasonably be expected to impair his objectivity or independence of judgment. So do you think that section was violated when he made a motion and then voted to accept his church's application to use school district facilities? And again, this is a church that he received money from. Do you think that was a conflict, true or false? You're correct. That is true. They found that it was completely improper. He should have abstained. He was receiving money, and his objectivity, or at least it would have appeared to the public that his objectivity was completely biased or not impartial. Dr. Osborne, how about this one? A board member violated Section B of the School Ethics Act, which says that a board member should not use or attempt to use his official position to secure unwarranted privileges or advantages or employment for himself or members of his immediate family. So did a board member violate Section B of the Act and the Code of Ethics by making a motion to change Columbus Day on the district calendar to Indigenous People Day, stating that her vote was due in part to the good example that she wanted to set for her child? Do you think that was a violation, yes or no? Yes? No, it was not. It turned out to be proper. So, and I'll read you from the actual decision. The School Ethics Commission said that as a general matter, board members are oftentimes guided by their own personal opinions and beliefs about a particular issue or cause, and unless the conduct or action exceeds the scope of their authority or is otherwise unethical, which is not the case here, board members are free to do so. So they found that, look, just because she had a personal belief in something, it didn't mean it was a violation of the School Ethics Act. Mr. Sargent, an executive of a charter school violated Section A of the School Ethics Act, which says no school official or member of his immediate family shall have an interest in a business organization or engage in a business transaction which is in substantial conflict with the proper discharge of his or her duties. So an executive director violated that section when she posted Black Lives Matter heart-shaped logo and a statement on the school website endorsing the Black Lives Matter organization. Do you think that was a true or a false? It was a false, because they, they found that she didn't have an interest. She wasn't involved with the Black Lives Matter organization. It was not a violation. These are hard folks. So again, I'm not trying to trip anybody up here. Ms. Rivera, it's a little bit long here, but of board member violated sections E, F, and G. E is recognizing your authority rests with the board. F is refusing to surrender your independent judgment, and G is confidentiality. So did a board member violate this provision when he, along with other township officials, distributed a flyer to those of Indian descent requesting they vote for candidates in the 2019 Democratic primary election, bracketed under the slogan, Middlesex County Democratic Organization? The flyer mentioned, among other things, that the person named on the flyer support South Asian persons and culture, and stated that the opponent, the person they were running against, was the leader of a radical group. The board member signed the flyer, and the signature included his picture and his name, followed by the words Board of Education, but he did not use the disclaimer. Was that a violation, true or false? No, it's a true. They found that he should have had that disclaimer. He should have said, I'm speaking as an individual. You're allowed to endorse people. You're allowed to say what you feel, but if you're going to do that, like I mentioned before, you need to have that disclaimer. Mr. Walsh, a board member violated section I and G of the code. I is supporting and protecting school personnel. G deals with confidentiality. When she shared a post on her first personal Facebook page that casted the complainant, who also was a substitute in the district, in a negative light. Namely, the post alleged that the substitute was removed from her position in the district as a result of unspecified misconduct. Do you think that was a violation, true or false? True, you're right, it was. That's not supporting school personnel by telling folks on social media that a substitute in the district was removed for misconduct. Who are we up to? Mr. Palmieri. A board member violated section B of the Ethics Act, and again, just to refresh everybody's memory, that has to do with using your official position to secure unwarranted privileges and advantages. So a board member violated section B of the Ethics Act when she voted to approve a resolution acknowledging that the superintendent had completed a merit goal. Her child was employed in the district as a teacher, so the board member's child worked in the district. As such, at the time of the vote, the superintendent had supervisory authority over the child. Do you think that that was a violation? True, absolutely. The board member should have recused herself because her child was in the line of supervision of the superintendent of schools. We have to Ms. Cass. Okay, next slide. A board member violated section E of the code. In this kind of case, you may have read about it because it was from a neighboring school district. It made my head spin. It's that you're recognizing your authority rests with the board and you're not to make personal promises or take private action that could compromise the board. And so, in this case, a board member violated section E of the code when he posted on Facebook many anti-Muslim sentiments, including a picture of Congressman Omar wearing a hijab and referring her to as terrorist 100%. In another post, he shared a photo of a doll dressed in a hijab. The doll appears to be a woman, has a black eye and a bruise on its chin. The text under the photo stated, Sharia Barbie comes with hijab, bruises, and the Quran. Stoning accessories available for additional purchase. Do you think that was a problem? Do you think that was private action that compromised the Board of Education? Yes, true, absolutely. And what the judge said in that case was, and I just thought it was important to read this. The judge said it's not a stretch to consider that students of families of students of Muslim faith may fear that their culture or faith may play a role in adverse decisions by the board based on his expression of negative attitudes towards Muslim culture and faith. Furthermore, they will be discouraged from even asking or seeking redress from the board if they feel there is no point. This is clearly an example of the conduct that would cause members of the board to lose the confidence and respect of the people and creates a justifiable impression that such trust is being violated. Next slide. Does anybody on the board or administration have any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Zittimer for the annual ethics required review. We appreciate it. I do have one other presentation this evening in regards to sharing our budget process. We're getting ready to enter into our budget process for the 22-23 school year. I will also go to the podium to present a few slides about our process before we move on. So as I mentioned, this is the time of the year where we outline to our public and to the board our process for working on our 22-23 school budget. So as a background, as we all know, we've been in this for a while now, for a few years. In 2018, New Jersey passed a law known as S2 that drastically impacted the amount of state aid we received. The cuts are applied in phases, and each year we endure them and are forced to make harder and harder choices. Over the last few years, it's been just awful for the district to lose so much money in their budget. You can see there each year what we have lost. This year, again, S2 is still intact, although we continue to advocate for fairer funding for the Jackson School District. So for next year's budget, we are looking at a $4.1 million cut, and that's almost $19 million that has been lost over 7 years. That's significant, and as you know, over the past few years, we've had to cut drastically in our staff in order to save programming for students. So with that, we do face this cut, and as you know, we can increase our tax levy only by 2%. And that last year, that figure was $1.7 million that came to the budget. That obviously is not going to cover a $4.1 million cut towards our budget. Putting that into perspective, when we start budgeting, we are already behind $4.1 million, and that does not account for our contract responsibilities for increases in salaries, rising costs, and as our public well knows and our board, the economy right now with rising costs in everything. Any facility work we want to do, anything in regards to purchasing things has increased tremendously. Gas prices, I'm sure we all feel that at the gas stations ourselves. Increased insurance plans and other increases to tuition outside of our control, and most recently, increases drastically to any bids that we go out for contracted transportation. However, this year, we do have some good news, and that is refreshing for us to be able to say that we do have grant money that is going to help us get through this $4.1 million cut. Do I wish we were other districts not in the same situation who didn't have to cut $4.1 million and all of our grant money could be spent on extras? But we are being wise about what we do so that we, again, don't look at drastic cuts to staffing for next year. All of this funding, you can see, we put the different timelines in which the money needs to be spent, and we'll begin making sure that we use this money in a fruitful way to support our $4.1 million cut moving forward. And you'll hear more about that throughout the budget process. Our budget timeline and our public input. This is the process we'll be using moving forward. To provide, we'll obviously want to provide multiple opportunities for the public to provide input and ask questions about the budget, both before the tentative budget is created and before the public hearing. And I'll go over a timeline in a moment. The budget calendar is established by the state, which means the budget timeline culminates with the public hearing on April 27th board meeting. You'll see here our next board meeting in February. We will be presenting publicly draft budgets for each of these department areas. We will also be going over again how we are using some of those grant funds to help support these programs and departments as well. March, we will present again a tentative budget at the board meeting. And then in April, we will be doing the public hearing for the budget that we are proposing to our county office. And so there's lots of opportunity. Those are 3 meetings right there for public input, obviously board input as well. And as always, we always post all of the information right tomorrow after this meeting. Ms. Irwin will post ways and opportunities for input, how to share your input, ask questions. Any budget presentation we do will be posted on our district website as well, and all of our full budget documents, our tentative, proposed, and final budgets will also be posted on our district website. So that is our process that we'll be using in the next few months to create next year's budget. Thank you, Ms. Irwin. Just a few more items, I promise. Recently, as the board knows and the public, the New Jersey Department of Health had shortened quarantine times for students and staff. Obviously, we were pleased about that, being able to keep our students in school more often. The district did take action immediately the very next day after those changes were introduced to us, and we have updated our road forward slides accordingly on our district website. I just wanted to remind our public and our students and our parents of high school students that our academy applications are open for the remainder of this week. They will close on Friday. Please, if you're interested in STEM, the arts, digital media, or business, please complete your application. They are excellent programs to be a part of. You heard some of our high school reps talk about some of the wonderful things that were happening in these academies, so I encourage you to apply. And as a final note for our public, our preschool lottery is open now, so please apply if you have a preschool student. It closes on February 4th, and again, any information on that is posted on our district website. And with that, Mr. Walsh, that concludes my very long superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you. Okay, standing committee reports. State and county school boards. Ms. Rivera?
Yeah, the next county meeting, February 22nd at 6:30, will be virtual.
Thank you. Parent group liaison, that's me. Okay, there was a virtual meeting on the 12th of January with the parent groups. Superintendent and assistant superintendents discussed a lot of the programs that they talked about today. Okay, and the individual schools were talking about what they are doing inside their buildings, such as, scholastic book sales and other events that they are trying to run within the school building for the PTOs. The next meeting will be on March 7th. Special education, Ms. Rivera.
There'll be a workshop on Wednesday, February 9th, 2022, a virtual. The presenter will be students with disabilities transitioning into Ocean County College. For more information, they'll, and it's open to all in-district and out-of-district families. Thank you.
Okay, scholarship, that's me. Just to let everyone know that next week, the scholarships will open for all seniors at Jackson Liberty and Jackson Memorial. They can get into the portal, put in their applications, and fill in what each sponsor wants as far as their deciding parameters for picking a senior. Building and grounds, I don't think we've really met. We get a report every month. Okay. Right now, we do have a few pressing issues with the EPA in our fueling area over there at Memorial, the transportation. Okay, and we are in the process of finishing up the ESIP project. I know a few things are behind, okay, but everything seems to be going along pretty well. Okay, budget and finance. You've seen the time frame behind me. Okay, the superintendent gave it. We have not met as a subcommittee. The district, after they put all their information together, we will meet as a subcommittee and discuss the budget presentation as it is finalized. Transportation. ongoing. Transportation is a very alive situation right now. We have not met with this board as a subcommittee with transportation. It will happen probably within the next month, and we do have a lot of things to discuss. Curriculum committee, they have not met. They will probably get together within the next month too. Policy committee, we haven't met since November. Probably meet in February for updating any new policy changes from the state. And our enrollment and student committee, they've only met once. They're still collecting data as far as that's concerned. That basically deals with, okay, the flux in student populations within the different schools. Where are they building? How are they building? When are they building? Okay, we're still collecting a lot of data as far as that's concerned. That's all the standing committees. I need a motion to approval of the minutes. The closed session of the meeting December 15th, 2021, and the official board meeting December 15th, 2021, Committee of the Whole business meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis?
Yes.
Mrs. Cass?
Yes.
Dr. Osmond?
Yes.
Mr. Palmieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes. Need a motion for approval of the bill list.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis?
Yes.
Mrs. Cass?
Yes.
Dr. Osmond?
Yes.
Mr. Palmieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes. I need a motion for approval of the treasurer's and board secretary's reports.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis?
Yes.
Mrs. Cass?
Yes.
Dr. Osmond?
Yes.
Mr. Palmieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh?
Yes. I need a motion to open public forum on agenda items only. We will hold another public forum during this meeting for all other questions. The public forum will be for questions on the agenda only.
Motion.
Second.
When your name is called by Mrs. Richardson, please come to the microphone. Each person will be allowed a maximum of 5 minutes to speak. No person may speak more than once on a topic until all others have been heard. Mrs. Richardson, please call the first person.
The first person on this list is Suri Robinson.
Hello, good evening. It's nice to see you all again. I have a comment, not a question, on the agenda. I noticed that tonight's agenda includes approving some items for the Jackson Public School students, including an overnight trip for a state competition, an intramural flag football after-school program, and an esports program. These are clearly not mandated items required by law, yet as parents and educators, of course, we never aim for the minimum our barometer is not what's mandated, but we aim to provide the best for our students and what's good for our students and our children. It's really nice to see the board go above and beyond to include programming that it's good for our students, not simply what's mandated. And I support a yes vote on these items. I am very hopeful that we won't hear the terms, this is what's mandated or required by law, when it comes to creating policy for non-public school transportation. I support a yes vote for the extracurriculars, and I thank you for your time.
Christine McGinley.
thank you to all our new board members. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I was very happy to see on the agenda a reference involving training for some of the staff in dyslexia. This is a topic that's very close to my heart because my son is dyslexic and he is currently in the 4th grade. I've given all of the board members a copy of the Department of Education, the New Jersey Department of Education's handbook on dyslexia. And in it are best practices. And I've flagged a few pages for your reference because it's really important. And even if a student has a diagnosis of dyslexia, this document encompasses best practice for all struggling readers. I think we can agree that the past 2 years has definitely had an impact on the ability to close the gap for many learners. So I just wanted to draw your attention to this. On the first page, number 1, this document is to inform both educators, families, and best practices to support students with dyslexia and other reading difficulties. I then have a flag on page 13 that has a whole section committed to 3rd grade and beyond. And this in particular is why I'm here, because the realization that I have come to this school year with my son in 4th grade is that all of the wonderful foundation programs, that's the name of the interventions for kindergarten through 3rd grade, come to a halt in 4th grade. They are not continued. My son left off on level 2 foundations, started 4th grade. They don't do foundations anymore. So if you could please turn to the orange tab. The reason why this is very important is because when you're providing instruction to address reading difficulties, in particular dyslexia, the program must be sufficiently intensive, frequent sessions, and extended time to accomplish objectives. This is in the making for my son, but as a whole, the district is not, this is not written into curriculum. I asked for the scope and sequence for literacy instruction for 4th grade, and if you please turn to the blue tab, struggling readers need phonetic, phonics, a structured literacy program, intense, cumulative, and ongoing. And this scope and sequence, where I have the blue tag, shows the very many varied phonics or phonemes that struggling readers have to learn. Nowhere in the district's scope and sequence for literacy is any phonics listed. It's higher level comprehension goals, and they're great. These same struggling readers need to have that type of instruction, but there absolutely must be a structured literacy program that addresses phonics. A struggling reader doesn't suddenly become proficient because they're in 4th grade. I request that you really take a look at this document. I plan to be back here again addressing some of the points. The State Department, along with communities and learning specialists, this is a magnificent document. We don't have to recreate the wheel. There are many things that we could be doing. I love the 2 programs, you know, the before school program. Sadly, when I inquired about my son attending a before school program, I was told it's not for him, because that's for tiered intervention students. Well, just because someone has the special ed IEP shouldn't remove them from receiving a program intended to close that gap. So I'm delighted to see that we've pulled the ESSER funds to provide some of these interventions, but
Mrs. McGinley, your time is up.
My time's up. Okay.
There's no one else on the list.
All right, seeing no one else on the list, okay, I need a motion to close public forum.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolutions for action. I need a motion to move finance.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. I have a couple questions. Number 6, is this additional money related to the ISIP? I guess this is a question for Michelle.
You're saying finance number 6 about Johnson Controls? Is that what you're asking? That is not. That's a normal contractor that we deal with. We put out to bid, and we put every year onto the board agenda to approve that year, but it's a 5-year bid that we put out.
Okay, because that's the same company as in the ESIP project.
It
all
is.
right, but this has nothing to do.
This has nothing to do with that.
Okay, all right. Number 10. Okay, what is the difference between the two plans? 10 finance. This is all under finance.
Okay, we're required by law to offer a flexible spending account for employees, and so
Yeah.
we do that. We've been doing that for, I think it's about 10 years now. And right now, the ESC, who we are a partner with and a co-op with, they have put out a new bid, and they got a new company that's doing this same service for school districts, offering us flexible spending account. It's a third-party administration service that they offer to us. We're looking into this company now because the company we've had a few problems, but not real bad. But we think that going with a company that's dealing with school districts specifically will help us along the way. So we wanted to give it a shot, and some of the costs are less with this company too.
Okay, so you think it's going to be easier to work with this other company?
I think so. Then they understand the nuances of working with a school district.
Okay, so that's the benefit of it?
Yes.
Okay. And with number 11, okay, what caused the increase in cost? This is part of the...
Correct. I didn't get time to explain this to you earlier, just so you understand. What you remember when we did the ESIP, it was over almost 2 years ago when we did all of that and we put it out to bid. It was a specific amount of money. When we had all that together, there was something on there called a rebate to one of the companies on there. And now remember, we had a finance team, we had an attorney, we had a bond counsel, we had everything involved in that, but everybody interpreted that $100,000 to be a prepayment on the ESIP. It was not. It was something that went directly to one of the vendors. It was something that the BPU offered, and it went directly to a vendor. So we gave the one company a contract to do this much work in our district, which they did. And now when I got to the end of it, I'm like, wait a minute, we're missing $100,000 of what's to be paid. And this is how we're handling this. We spoke with our auditor on how to handle it. I spoke with all the finance people from back then, and they said, well, you have to pay the money, of course, because we wrote them a purchase order for that amount.
Okay, so in a nutshell, basically there's a rebate that went to the contractor and not to us.
And not to DCO, which is
Okay,
our...
all right, I understand that.
Yeah, okay.
Any other discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
So on number 9 in finance, in regards to the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, we had the option to fix our system or rebuild, and we've decided to fix. It's $102,000 roughly to fix. The tanks have a 9-year left on its life expectancy, and the current rebuild at today's price is roughly $556,000. And it states here that it will give us time to put money in capital reserve to plan to rebuild by the end of 9 years. Could we get some clarification on how much yearly we're committing to put away, so we will have these funds prepared at a premium, because it will probably be more than $556,000 in 9 years to satisfy this project?
I totally agree with you that it will be more in 9 years. Just this past, for June 2021, we put $500,000 into capital reserve just then. So we're able to put some money away into capital reserve, and we will make sure that we're going to cover that expense.
So will it be specific for this particular project, or just a total capital reserve we're going to keep?
It gets put in the capital reserve. It's the board's decision as we go on to see exactly where it goes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion?
I just want to add to that the long-range facility plan is what drives the use of that money as well.
Absolutely.
Hearing no other discussion, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis?
Yes.
Mrs. Cass?
Yes.
Dr. Osmond?
Yes.
Mr. Palmieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes. A motion to move facilities.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion. Number one, I have a little question. With these rooms, which we are changing their designation for the preschool classes, we had disabled and inclusion, switching to inclusion. Is there a difference between the two?
In regards to the program or the classroom?
The classroom.
The classroom space?
Yes.
Yes. The classroom space is more suitable for a self-contained classroom versus an inclusion classroom. So self-contained sometimes needs to have a little bit more space to be able to run the program effectively.
But I see a couple are going from the disabled to inclusion. Okay, so
Yes, so the inclusion classrooms are what we aim for. We want our special education students to be with their like peers. So not only is it something that we aim for, but it's also something that the State Department encourages as well. So some of our preschool programs are being converted to inclusion classrooms that will include both special education and their typical peers.
So there's modifications made for that to
In
go
regards to the
from
classrooms?
disabled to inclusion?
In regards to classroom space?
Yes.
Sometimes, yes.
Okay.
Sometimes the spaces look different, not always.
Okay, all right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mrs. Barakis?
Yes.
Mrs. Cass?
Yes.
Dr. Osmond?
Yes.
Mr. Palmieri?
Yes.
Mr. Sargent?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivera?
Yes.
And Mr. Walsh?
Yes. Motion to move programs.
Motion.
Second.
Discussion.
I have a question about this one, number 5. Okay, so for those who are in the audience, just so everybody's kind of on the same page, the ESSER 2 grant is supporting a before-school remedial tutoring service for at-risk students that were identified by their intervention and referral service department. So essentially, students are participating in this program. They'll come to school early. They'll receive about an hour of tutoring, if I'm reading it correctly, for about 24 days, so about 24 hours of tutoring. And this is through grant money. Grant money is always a great thing, and it's helpful. But my concern is that after a very challenging, COVID period, there's a lot of learning gaps, and most likely those learning gaps expanded instead of shrunk. And we saw even in today's presentation, I was looking at grade 4 specifically, and as great as many students did, there was almost an equal number of students that didn't do so great, which makes sense for grade 4. It gets a little bit harder in that grade. But these, I guess my 2 questions for this is there one, how are you going to assess that such a quick program is actually working? I mean, it's only 24 hours with some of your weaker scholastically challenged students. So how do you know if that's working? And two, is there any talk about expanding these programs, maybe cutting into another budget or, you know, emergency COVID money if you're able to use it in this way? These before school programs could be really, really effective. I just question how effective 24 hours is.
So the first question is, how are we assessing the progress of the students within the program? And so you know the students that are targeted for that program are, as Mr. Rotante demonstrated, we have lots of formative assessments. So we use those formative assessments to help us identify who could benefit most from some extra support beyond what they're already receiving in the school day. So they're identified, and we use those same assessments to monitor progress. So that's one way that they're assessed. This particular program is using our ESSER funds, but it doesn't mean that it's the last program we will do. We do have other opportunities that we'll be looking at moving forward in the spring as well. And we also do have intervention during the school day in our elementary buildings. This is an elementary program, which is called Win Period. And they receive what they need, again, based on the formative assessments, and that's built into the schedule every day. And as I said, we'll continue to expand our programs as well. Mr. Rotante, would you add anything to that? Can you come to the mic just so people can hear you, please?
Can I just ask a follow-up that Mr. Rotante could probably add while he's up there? Is there a benchmark that you're looking for where you could say, this is successful, we like this, we should potentially keep this going?
Sure. One of the programs that we're going to be using during that morning program is our IXL, and that keeps individualized student data on every child, so we can see growth and progress over the course of those 24 sessions. The ESSER funds are available through September of 2024, and we've budgeted for this program to continue